Hi everyone and welcome to P2P Showdown Sundevils edition. I'm your host Omar and here with me to discuss the fall of Nicolás Maduro is Avery and Jonathan or Rosales. Jonathan, do you prefer to be called Jonathan or Rosales? What's your first name?
My first name is Jonathan, but
Mhm.
most people in college call me Rosales. That's what I go by, yeah.
Oh yeah, I thought I also remember your name was Jonathan.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for accommodating my short notice.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure to help out, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we begin, just a brief disclaimer. The views expressed in this discussion do not represent the personal political beliefs of the participants, as discussions are intended strictly for academic and analytical purposes. That being said, in the early morning of January 3rd, the United States has carried out what it's called, quote unquote, Operation Law Enforcement in Caracas, Venezuela, resulting in the arrest of Nicolás Maduro along his wife. The couple were then subsequently being transported to New York, where they are now facing criminal charges in U.S. court. Jonathan, let me start with you. What was your reaction when you wake up to the news? What was your immediate reaction?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I had actually been notified by my friends because typically when something big happens, I get a lot of messages through social media on like, "Oh, did you see this? Did you see this?" I think it's pretty normal for a political science major. But when I heard he had been captured, like I was I was happy because all of Latin America, almost all of it, or a majority of people agree like that he was not a good president. You know, he was a terrible dictator. So I was happy for Venezuelans who had been suffering from that dictatorship for the past decade. But as I continued to read the message, because I was genuinely just waking up, so I was just reading the messages because our one of my group chats was getting spammed, and I was looking through it, and then they're like, "Watch Trump's speech." I tuned in a little bit. I only got to hear like a couple of the last minutes. I didn't get to hear the whole speech, but I was genuinely astonished when Trump said that the U.S. would rule or run Venezuela for the time being.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll get to that in a second. But did you find out in the morning, like when you wake up? What time? What time? Like,
Yeah, I found it like in the morning.
uh,
I worked pretty late that night, so I probably didn't wake up till 12 p.m. in Arizona, you know.
no, I and Avery, I think we find out a bit early because we usually don't sleep that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Avery, were you flabbergasted, especially by the nature of which it occurred?
I wouldn't say I was necessarily surprised. I definitely was surprised by like the speed and the volume of the attack because, uh, as you know, Umar, I we were both up at that exact same time. Like I saw it was like 3 a.m. or something like that when all the Venezuelans were like, um, updating their videos to like TikTok and Instagram that the attacks were ongoing. I saw that and I was like, man, I should really look into this, but I need to sleep. So I saw the attacks, I saw the helicopters and everything. And then when I woke up in the morning, probably at like also around like 10 or 11 o'clock, I saw that Maduro had been captured. And I wasn't as late to the press interview with Trump, but I saw like around the middle of it because I had seen people were updating the clips that Trump was saying that they were going to run Venezuela. And I don't remember if it was that morning or later on when it was also announced that they were going to have like a conference of the big oil that was going to um, like discuss like the financing and stuff like that. Because Trump had also said early on about like I forget the amount, but it was like a sizable amount that would be pledged to the country through the oil companies to like expand the infrastructure and the business, and then like some like quasi relationship where the
No.
US was paying the oil industries, but then like the oil
We'll
industries would
get
be
that,
paying
we'll
off the
get
debt.
down to the oil
Yeah.
in a second. Um, Every what do you think the impact is reflect on Venezuelans, those who support Maduro and those who celebrate his overthrow because they view him as a dictator?
Yeah, well, first I want to point out if you look at the statistics since really 1999 with Maduro's party when Hugo Chavez came to power through it was the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. Around it, like estimates range from like 3.5 to almost like 8 million Venezuelans have left the country, majority of which were under Maduro's tenure. So, um, and you can look at the data too. Maduro himself, I think in like 20, it was either in 2024 or 14, I don't remember. His government put out a statement that like an estimated around like 3 to 4 million Venezuelans left, but they had returned to the country. So obviously there's a lot of Venezuelans that oppose the government. Most of them are in exile because they were either against the socialist government or they're pushed out for economic reasons. And and as Rosales has stated, most Latin Americans do not agree with the politics. There's a lot of Cold War holdouts. My partner is Cuban, and there's an extreme divide in Latin Americans over pro-socialist and anti-socialist settlements, and you definitely see that a lot. Most of the videos I've seen of Maduro supporters are like older officials who were part of Chavez's government or were part of the socialist groups that were fighting in Venezuela in like the 70s.
Got it. Rosales, what about his supporters? And does it
Yeah,
give
I
way to
think
perhaps a civil war?
yeah, I think it's definitely hard to say what the supporters think. I feel like the supporters are much more of a smaller group of people. I mean, I think it's good to look at social media to give us a glimpse or somewhat of a taste of what the people are going through or what the people are thinking. I mean, for the most part, what I've seen, I haven't seen much social media or TikToks or stuff like that where the vast of the population are upset that his fall happened. I even saw, there's this very famous clip that is has been going around that that people in I'm not sure how long the clip is, but they're throwing the money in the air because it has all essentially no value. Um, I think that just speaks a lot about the economy within the country. And even a few years back, I had seen stuff like some type of protest on it was actually a form of advocacy on where they would put graffiti on the wall that said no hay pan, which means there's no pan, which pan is a Venezuelan flour brand. And in their local supermarket, they couldn't find their own brand, if that makes sense. So that just points out the social economic status of the average person in Venezuela and their lack of, you know, being able to eat and stuff like that. So, it's it's very hard to say exactly what the supporters think. Um, but as Avery is saying, like it's a small percentage of people, probably those who are originally with the previous leader within Venezuela.
Mhm.
And on your point, as you mentioned, Trump said that the United States will quote unquote run the country. Who do you think realistically rules Venezuela next, and what gives that, success or legitimacy?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? It cut out for me.
Yeah, oh, sorry. So President Trump says that the United States will quote unquote run Venezuela. Who rules Venezuela next? And where does that successor drives his legitimacy from?
I'd
Yeah,
like to start with, can I start with this?
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah.
I would say it's definitely going to be big oil. This honestly goes back to Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez. If you look at Venezuela, like I forget the statistics, but majority of their economy is exports in metals and primarily oil. Um, We saw previously China had pledged, I don't remember the amount, but I think it was around like $10 billion. I don't remember if that was yuan or if that was US dollars in support for Venezuela's oil economy. And it's it's kind of a situation where it's just like that's their main export. Whoever backs that part of the economy is going to have the support because if they don't have the economic support from that sector, then there's really no legitimacy. Because one of the first things that Chavez did after his revolution was that he nationalized the oil industry. And I think it was in 2005, in an ultimatum, he made it so that any oil company that was operating in the country, the Venezuelan government had to have majority stocks in it. So I think it was Exxon and maybe Shell, they actually left the country during that time. And then I think it was either 2014 or 2020 again, Chinese companies started moving in to kind of fill that void and to pledge a lot of money because that industry had been declining since the loss of Western support in the 90s with Chavez's revolution. So ultimately, whoever backs the oil economy is going to get the support. And we saw that with the lady who just won the Nobel Peace Prize. What's her name?
Maria Machado.
Yeah, Ria Machado. She was a very outspoken detractor of Maduro, and she was also a very much heavy supporter of I don't remember if it was denationalizing the oil industry, but
Yeah.
bringing back some of those companies back in. And there was also before that this recent debacle and the Nobel Peace Prize, a lot of people, the US and I think the European Union still
Uh,
viewed
Maria Trump has ruled out Maria Machado.
I know, I
She
just saw
is
they had a
not
falling out.
respected. She doesn't have the respect of the country. So
Hmm.
how could she?
Yeah, well, I mean, the only other candidate I could see would be what was his name?
Or the guy that supposedly have won the previous
Yeah,
election.
the guy who lost the contested election as in exile because
Yeah,
the EU and the US still viewed him as a legitimate
yeah.
president um since 2024. And then I had
She
also
said that she'll be his vice president if he is to rule in the near future.
maybe, but then I had just seen some talks yesterday with the current acting president, Delcy Rodriguez. She was supposedly in talks with Marco Rubio about like I don't know, like acting as president to allow like the agencies to come back in and kind of rebuild because she's really the only like legitimate figurehead. There's still like there's always been accusations that Maduro never really ran the country, that it was his deputy ministry of the interior or it was the minister of the armed forces, which I see. And one of my fears to kind of end my point is that we have the option of US oil, or we have the option of factional warfare between pro and anti-government forces, because they essentially, these ministers essentially control the military and they control the propaganda machine. And one last thing, too, is that uh, I'll leave off cartels right now to let Rosales talk, but
Rosales, Rodriguez has been sworn in now as as accordingly with the Venezuelan constitution, she's now sworn in as the president. Who do you think realistically makes the next successor?
I think it's very complicated to say exactly the leadership of Venezuela. It's extremely uncertain, especially at this point. This news is only just fairly recent, so it's hard to say exactly what will happen. We can't say exactly what will happen, but obviously there's the vice president like is still insists that Maduro is still the legitimate president under the constitution, their constitution. But the United States rejects that claim and is saying that they're going to be running the country. So it gets really complicated, and obviously it does, in my humble opinion, it does have to do a lot with the oil. You know, the United States has a history of going into other countries because of their resources, not really because of their motive um to protect democracy. Um, and in reality, if we're speaking about it, you know, I don't think the United States needs that oil, but they'd rather, have that oil to prevent countries like China and Russia or other foreign powers from gaining that influence. So honestly, it's very, very tricky to say exactly what's going to happen. And honestly, time can only tell exactly who is going to be running Venezuela.
Yes, Trump has said, and his administration, of course, that Venezuelans have stole US's oil, and they also cite things like narco-tourism and Maduro's illegitimacy. What do you think is the real motive behind this operation?
Yeah, I honestly think it has to do really with the oil. As if we talk about the trafficking, the US is making allegations that Maduro and Venezuelan officials are involved of facilitating cocaine within the United States. Uh, I'm not trying to defend Maduro, rather I'm trying to make it seem that, you know, his actions or that their government's actions is not a representation of Venezuela and not a representation of Latinos as a whole. Um, but these are serious charges. But there's still allegations, you know. He has pleaded not guilty, and the case is still ongoing. So, I mean, it's very. I feel like it's another factor in where they're blaming him to make him seem. Well, I do agree that he is a bad leader, but what I'm trying to say is that I feel like this is a distraction from making it seem like Donald Trump to the public of the United States, to the average person that's probably not been in college, that just sees their news through the television or through social media, that it's making him seem like better that it's not about the oil, that they're doing it to for the protection of democracy. So yeah, I think it's a very, very complicated, and people have their own opinions on this. But in my humble opinion, I think it has to do with the oil and that the narco terrorism or trafficking. It's hard to say whether if it's true because they're
Is
just allegations.
Maduro even involved in drug trafficking as Trump's administration claimed? Does he
Yeah,
have these cartels and in transporting those drugs? And
yeah, I'm honestly not sure about that. If I'm gonna be completely honest,
yes,
all I could find is that they're just serious legal charges, and there's still allegations, but. It's hard to say exactly if Venezuela is involved with that. And I've also seen a lot of people on social media saying that their main export is actually the drugs and that everybody in Venezuela is happy. But and I think they have the right to be happy. I even saw one famous thing social media post that I saw that says que no opinen si no eres venezolano, which means you don't have an opinion if you're not Venezuelan. So I guess according to her, we're not in the right. Um, but because we can understand to a certain point of what they went to, but we didn't feel it, we didn't experience it, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult to say exactly on the US's claims against Maduro.
right. Avery, what do you think? Was it about drug? Was it about oil? Maduro's illegitimacy, democracy? What is it really?
Um, Honestly, all the points pretty much boil down to oil because you control the oil. It definitely supports Trump's initiatives, especially with tariffs in the EU and their energy crisis. Remember, we heavily tariff and subsidize Canadian oil. Now, with Venezuela's oil, they're only producing like a tenth of their potential output. Currently, if we step in, we're going to up that. It's going to cost a lot of money and time, but we up that. And as we all know, the EU is very heavily reliant on oil right now. And more they're having to choose between Russian oil at the price of political scrutiny or US oil at the very high, like physical cost. And also, if we control the oil in Venezuela, it further deters China, it deters Russia, it even deters Iran. And one comment I have to make on that is that um, this has it it has positives and negatives, especially with China, because this definitely deters their Belt and Road Initiative, but it could have the unforeseen consequence of pushing them further into Africa, as we've seen. And just, I think at the end of last week, China was beginning military exercises around the coast of Taiwan again. So we'll see how that happens. But with regards to cartels, the accusations have existed since the 90s. We all know. I'd call it conspiracy theory at this point. The conspiracy of the Three Sons cartel, that supposedly the Venezuelan government is the mastermind of this like coalition of drug smuggling cartels. Um, I don't I don't deny it, but I don't also fully believe it. Because if you look at the figures, like 90% of cocaine smuggling comes from Colombia. Peru and Venezuela combined only account for like 10%. So it's not as big. They're not the main problem, but they're still part of the problem. And cocaine, narco trafficking has been steadily happening. One thing I actually wanted to point out, a lot of it, maybe call it a coincidence, but in 2005, Venezuela cut their ties with the USDA, the Drug Enforcement Agency. And since then, actually, the Venezuelan government reports of cocaine seizures on the border has diminished. But the data of like reported cocaine activity in the US or in Colombia and Mexico hasn't decreased along with those numbers. So it makes you think, well, if Venezuela doesn't have anything to do with cocaine smuggling, then why is it going up? And also, drugs are a major finance point for any regime. If Venezuela isn't getting as much money from their oil enterprises, certainly cocaine is an excellent way to do that. And even if you look at past and recent history, Venezuelan irregular groups have a very long history of connections to drug cartels and fighting alongside the Colombian border. If if cartels weren't as big of a problem in Venezuela, then why does the Venezuelan government, Maduro's government basically had no control over the Colombian and Venezuelan border? It's just a constant fight between irregular groups. And Colombia even admitted that they can't really control the border either, just because these supposed narco groups that don't exist, don't have any like government sanction or authorization, are stronger than the government and are just allowed to free reign and like fight over known like drug shipping routes. It it's just a little speculative whether or not it's certainly uh it's definitely, I believe that Venezuelan officials are like letting this happen because when if you have a government that has such high levels of corruption, of course there's going to be figures that are pocketing money and allowing this to happen. But I don't believe it's such like a nationally supported widespread thing as it happens because the the data points in both directions. Three Sons Cartel might not exist, but then you also have I always forget the names, but there's one historic Colombian cartel. It's called like the 34th Street or something like that, that actually in also around Maduro's when his first term came to pass, they actually moved from Colombia into Venezuelan territory. And then you have the Tren de Aroguas cartel, the Venezuelan cartel that's in the United States that's known for cocaine trafficking. they supposedly also have ties to Venezuela to transport cocaine because they wouldn't side with a Colombian cartel. They're going to be working with Venezuelans. It's just how like nationalism and cartel like organization works.
Yeah, that then begs the question, was this operation a success, Rosales?
Uh, that's a very complicated question. I'm not too entirely sure exactly how I want to answer it, but I think, well, if it is true about the drugs and stuff like that, that they're not allegations, I guess it is a benefit for the United States since they're limiting those type of drugs entering the United States. Um, but I'm not too
The
sure.
United States has carried out, as Professor John Mearsheimer noted, 18 regime changes during the Cold War. None of them was successful. How is this any different?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? It cut out for me
You
again.
say the United States has conducted 18 regime change operations in the Cold War alone, and none of them was successful. How is this any different from, say, Libya, Iraq, Taliban, vis-a-vis Afghanistan, just to, replace the Taliban with the Taliban after 20 years and trillions spent, not to mention the loss of lives. So how is Venezuela any different in this case?
In my opinion, it's not any different. It's clearly following a trend that has been, within the United States history for a long time. I'm a believer that I feel that we shouldn't intervene in this sense, with other countries. So I believe it's a trend that is definitely following, and I don't think it's any different. It always has to do with some type of resource. So in this case, I do believe it's the oil. I don't really believe that it's in any other question that they're trying to do something else, that it is for democracy, that is blah blah blah. You know, it doesn't make sense if it was just for the moto, because if let's say Venezuela was not like interfering at all with the United States, well, then the United States wouldn't have a reason to go in. Like, if it wouldn't have another factor, like something like narco trafficking and stuff like that, allegedly or whatever. I think, yeah, I think it's following a trend. And I feel like it's hard to justify something like this, but I think that putting um a let sorry, like how do I say this? At, oh yeah, making those allegations. Sorry, I forgot the word, but making those allegations
Very
against Venezuela.
legal.
Yeah, making those allegations about like Venezuelans, and not just it's not painting just the leader, but it's painting like the people of Venezuela as those type of people. I think it's another way to justify what the United States is doing as good, and making it reasonable for them to say, "Oh yeah, we deserve this part of oil," because I'm pretty sure Donald Trump also said that the United States gave those structures and oil to Venezuela. So they're painting it also as like, "Oh, we're just taking some of it back." So I think it's very it's a very complicated term
It's
to
hard
talk
to
about.
tell. As a friend, I'll tell you of a secret. I heard a hair say that actually this whole operation is a fabricated one, meaning
Mm.
Maduro and Trump supposedly have a deal that Maduro will be arrested and then maybe jailed for 1 year in New York and whatever, and then live his life happily ever after in, say, Miami or somewhere in Florida. It's in a way Trump get access to that oil, and Maduro, his party, which what do you say, Rodriguez, Delcy Rodriguez, she continues, and that is why he, throw was Maria under the bus. So it's kind of a win-win case for both. Or is it that I also heard that Delcy Rodriguez, perhaps she's the one that, throw Maduro under the bus, and and now she's taking over, and she declared that she's ready to work with the Trump's administration on the oil. Which one is it, if any?
Well, I mean, if you look at the accusations, I mean, like I was just going through like the Three Sons cartel conspiracy, like going through the Wikipedia page. It's all like, oh, Maduro's the head of it. Oh, no, 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 this the Deputy Ministry of the Interior is the head of it. Or no, oh, Dusty Rodriguez is actually the head of it. So like it's up to it. I want to say, as funny as it would be, I definitely could see that Maduro is just kind of like released on like to like live in exile basically.
He
Because I
seemed
mean,
relieved. He was wishing. I think you've seen that. You actually sent me the clip. He was wishing Happy New Year's and taking
yep.
pictures. And adding to that, there hasn't been any. What about all of those Russian, Chinese, defense systems? None of
Yep.
it. It was like a very swift operation, sort of the same.
Yeah, all the Russian and Iranian supplied weapon systems were pretty much immediately destroyed. And um yeah, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, what I will say is that Maduro the government and economy of Venezuela has been steadily collapsing over Maduro's tenure. I mean, we've seen how many people, like nearly like an estimated 5 to 6 million Venezuelans left the country pretty much over like economic reasons. It wouldn't be much to say that that Maduro didn't want to have to deal with his economy and his government anymore. And I mean, if we're making a comparison, a pretty good comparison would be, say, Panama, where we stepped in and we overthrew the government of Panama because the Panama's government wanted to basically block the US from using the Panama Canal. Um, it's a similar situation, but also when you look at it, Maduro hasn't really done as much like against the US as say like Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein has done. He's just kind of said like, "Oh, I don't like the US." He hasn't really done too many like actions, so I can see he could definitely be given more like leniency in things like this. But then again, if he's supposedly going to go to like live out exile in Florida, he's got to watch out for all the Latin Americans that hate him simply because
He's
he's a
he's
communist.
definitely a character. Like I've seen multiple clips of him that has nothing like what he says on his press or
Yeah, he's
he has nothing to do
dancing,
with
Yeah,
politics.
the
Yeah,
dance
he's
was the
just
best part.
DJing.
he's
It's
I'm
like
gonna
definitely a
miss it so
character.
much.
So
he's just a figure. I mean, like honestly, he's just a figurehead. He was like the only top ranking person that was left in Chavez's party after he died. So they're like, well, we don't want this like militaristic bureaucrat that was literally fighting in the jungle for 50 years to lead the country. We'll set this new guy, he's
If
hip
I'm
with
a
the kids.
dictator, if I'm a dictator and I know my days are numbered, I want to spend it the way Maduro has spent it. Dancing, singing.
Yeah,
Uh,
doing photo ops, dancing, posing with guns, like all that stuff.
yeah.
making claims that he's better than Messi or
Oh.
something like that. I saw something like that.
Yeah. Oh, is there any way you can expand the time? We've got like 2 minutes left.
Yeah, we'll be talking about, we'll be cutting this short and then we'll come back to talk about the Monroe Doctrine and international law and also what President this operation has said. Um, yeah, so hang tight. We'll end this now and then we'll rejoin. I'll send you the links or the meeting IDs.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
See you.